Hello, welcome to Extraordinary Women TV with Shannon Skinner. I am speaking with guest Dr. Nicola Bird, who's a psychotherapist. In fact, she's a visionary psychotherapist who pioneered a groundbreaking approach to personal transformation and brain training. And she's here to talk about how we can change our thought patterns, our negative thought patterns. Later in the segment, before we take a break, I'll have my regular Good to Know Minute when I ask my guests for their top tip on living a successful life. You'll hear Nicola's hello.
Hi, Shannon. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here, Dr. Nicola Bird.
Nicola, please.
We were talking about that actually
Yes.
before the show, the use of doctor and how some people shy away from it who have that designation and others don't. They like to use it. But you go by Nicola.
Absolutely. That's more relatable, and I kind of think of that as kind of old school. And I'm just like everybody else in terms of working through my own conflicts, and I really want to. It's about everybody being able to relate back to me as well,
Right.
and feel really that they're not on their own. We're not, and that's a big part of when we're moving through any challenges that we have. We can often feel we're all by ourselves or on our own. And that feeling of commonality, that we're all in it together and we're all, so that I'm not removed from them, I'm a part of the journey.
Now, speaking of the journey,
Yes.
You are here today because you've had an interesting journey, and one that really came out of you feeling stuck.
Oh, yes.
You were stuck, and this is something that so many people feel
Yes.
in their lives, in their careers, stuck. What does stuck feel like, and how does somebody know that they are actually stuck?
Well, first of all, it's very frustrating. You can feel very helpless and powerless and have no sense of control.
Right.
Everyone goes through periods in their life where they feel stuck. I think it's
Yeah.
impossible. Life has a lot of challenges. And when we're stuck is when we see the same thing reoccurring, and we're trying our best to change it, we're trying our best to move forward, but we still find ourselves stuck in the same anxiety or fear, insecurity, or the pattern of relationships or career challenge. That's when we're stuck.
Right. And you were frustrated once upon a time.
Yes, I
Being
certainly
stuck.
was. And I certainly don't mean to imply that I have arrived anywhere. The goal of life is finding really healthy coping styles to manage the challenges so that we don't stay stuck for very long. It's like a blip, and you're able to use
Move
it.
on.
And not just move on, but use it as a stepping stone and a bridge towards where you will, to either actualizing your potential or getting to the next level of your life. So it becomes an opportunity.
You were a single mother,
Yes.
so this is this when it started?
Well, it was actually the marriage itself.
Okay.
I was married.
Okay.
I was really stuck then. I was married for I was married for 2.5 years, and my ex-husband was emotionally abusive. And so I left when my son was 9 months old, and I was really determined to create change for myself. I didn't want to keep the patterns going for myself or for my son. It was an opportunity for me to really face myself, not blame the other party, because it's so easy to get caught in what's going on around you. And I really saw it was a real mirror to myself, my soul, my thoughts, my way of functioning that created this unhealthy situation. And so my intention was use it as an opportunity to change. You know, you can either be a victim or you can use it in empowerment. And we always get to that junction, and that's how we get unstuck. But the thing is, I had been trying so hard to change, and there I was still having had no movement at all. So it can be really challenging and difficult, even when you're trying so hard, thinking you're doing everything right, and still find yourself playing out the same old patterns.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, what kinds of mental patterns are actually unhealthy? Because we have different mental patterns.
Right.
And some we might think are healthy and they're not, or some we might think are unhealthy and actually are healthy.
Shannon, that is such a good question, and it's really, you know, what you've said is you're saying so much in that statement. Well, first of all, because the work that I do is deeper, and you go deeper inside yourself, not just talk about things, you really look inside yourself and look at your own inner story, I get a certain bird's eye view or a lens into the psyche that what I end up seeing is that people have the same responses to different situations, and that we're not that different at all, and what we're thinking that gets us stuck. And the three main things that I see as a repetition is, one, blaming yourself for everything. That people start seeing themselves as the problem, that when a person does something or a situation, they think they're the problem and they did something wrong.
Sure.
So they blame themselves. The next thing is not feeling good enough. And you know, and if that gets really out of control, where you start to interpret problems and challenges which really are part of the journey, or another person's issues, their negative response or whatever, as your issue, you're not good enough, then that's another. And the third of that is your critical mind, putting yourself down, attacking yourself, problems, self-blaming. That's a huge challenge, the self-blaming.
Well, because it's easy to go into that, take no credit, take no blame, as
That's
somebody
right.
once said.
Right.
You're right. Yeah.
Well, it's because, part of our conscious and our ability to think and reason as human beings is our ability to observe ourselves. We need to be self-reflective, so that's the healthy part of it when you were saying what's healthy and what, but it can get out of control when you're self-reflecting. If you're self-reflecting, you're looking at yourself and observing yourself, which is important for healthy living.
Right.
We need to be healthy. That's where that's the positive function. But if it starts to cross over too much into areas where whenever you see an inadequacy or a limitation or a fear, you start beating up on yourself for it, you're disabling yourself. So it makes it hard for you to move through and overcome that block or that stumbling.
So what do people do when they're in that place?
Well, yes, it's a challenge. The first thing, you need to be really conscious of the pattern. And that can be really difficult because once something is so ingrained and it's become wired in you, you don't observe it. You think it's just normal. That's the way you think, that's the way you reason. But if you're stuck, that's the first sign. Ask yourself the question.
You don't see the paradox when you're in the paradox.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Because if you're accustomed to thinking a certain way, you don't understand that might be quote unquote wrong thinking, so to speak. I say wrong thinking in terms of quotation marks because there is nothing actually wrong. It's only if it's so dominant, this overriding every other healthy mechanism within you. So if it's really dominant, it will become unconscious, it will become habitual, and be hard for you to even see it. That's one. So it's becoming conscious. So if you're stuck, ask yourself, what are my thought processes? And start to maybe note how you're reacting to different situations that you find challenging. The second is to realize that the attachment to the pattern of behavior, that you will, and that's a hard one. Most people think, they think in an anxious way or worried way, and think, I just want to get rid of it. But my discovery in my work is everybody, without exception, is attached to the very thing that they're trying to change. And not only are they attached to it, they're actually using it to solve the problem. And then that's how they end up really being stuck, because what they're using to try and help themselves is actually what keeps them stuck.
Well, Einstein once said that you can't solve a problem at the same level it was created, that you need to rise above that to come to a solution.
Right. And
similar.
Yes, I certainly think that we do have to be able to step back again and look at it, but it can be hard if it's habitual. And so after you go through the recognition and then you go to the understanding the attachment, why you're actually functioning this way, that you actually think, how you think it's serving you. And that does take some looking at. So if a person, for instance, is putting themselves down, the motivation behind it is usually to motivate themselves. So they think that by driving themselves in a hard way is going to get a result, when in fact all they're feeling is feeding inadequacy or not good enough. So then they don't have a drive. They don't want to get, so they're self-beating. So once you start to question, hey, wait a minute, this isn't serving me, and that's what you do need to challenge, then the other task is redirecting yourself out of it. And that's the new ways of coping through a challenge, which is one way that I see works every time, but it's very difficult, as simple as it is to be really kind to the self. Be kind and nurturing to yourself through a challenge. People find that really hard to imagine, oddly enough, even though it makes sense logically, because they feel that they're being soft with themselves, but they don't understand that if you support yourself, not like self-indulgent, like it's okay, it's not a problem, but saying, okay, I understand that I have this challenge and it's been a habit, so hence I will lovingly guide myself to another awareness. That's a challenge.
Well, thank you, Nicola. We're going to take a quick break, and that means it's time for the Good to Know Minute, and I know you've got a great tip for the viewers.
Yes, thank you, Shannon. I would say to anyone, plug into themselves. Plug into your brilliance, plug into your talent, really focus on what you can do and pay attention to that every single day so that when you get into your self-doubts or your fears, you can overcome some of those negative thoughts by focusing on what you have done, what's really great in you, and make that your focus.
Well, thank you. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more with Nicola Bird, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Extraordinary Women with Shannon Skinner. I'm speaking with Nicola Bird, who is a psychotherapist and a pioneer in training the brain.
That's right.
You are also the author of the Boomerang Effect, how
That's
you
correct.
can take charge of your life. Here, I'm going to show it. Here, we've got it. Great. What sparked you to write this book, and what's the Boomerang Effect all about?
Well, it's exactly what we were talking about earlier about being stuck.
Yeah.
The boomerang is when the same thing returns and goes round and round again, and we're caught in the same cycle.
Yeah.
And so it's about how recognizing those cycles and tools and techniques to enable you to empower yourself and get past them.
Right. Now, you know, what sparked you to write a book about it?
My work, because that's what I
Yeah.
do every day, and it gives a certain perspective because, again, people are going deeper inside their psyche. So it's not just the word, it's the deeper part of what's deeply rooted, so people get I think a different perspective than a traditional one.
And tell me a little bit more, like, why the boomerang?
Well,
I mean,
again,
that's a great visual.
Oh, thank you. Yes, because that is, I think it's the metaphor of exactly what you feel like. It just keeps coming back
Yeah.
around. You're moving, you're flinging this thing out, trying to change it. You're trying to move out, but instead, it comes right back and knocks you, down. And how do you overcome that?
Right.
There is no person that doesn't get stuck in a cycle and doesn't find themselves in a cycle of life, the same pattern, the same situation.
Yeah, we saw like somebody who maybe a famous example of that is Amy Winehouse.
That's correct.
Situation where clearly she had some issues, some addictions, and
Yes.
who knows what else was really going on, but she obviously was stuck in a place and couldn't get out of it.
Yes, yes. And I mean, when I gave him the plug into you tip, the success tip, it really does come into that, where she just was so plugged into all of her own insecurities and challenges and pain,
Right.
and that she couldn't, despite all of her brilliance and all of her talent, that's a perfect example,
Yeah.
that she could not get to her, and that she couldn't hold on to her success, and she couldn't materialize it because all that was sabotaging and painful and destructive in her was more overrode and more dominant than that
Right.
part.
So why do so many women have such an issue of a bad body image
Right.
issue? I mean, this is something that so many women face. And, I don't know that mass media, that we can continue to blame mass media for
Right.
that. I'm sure it feeds it, but
Yes.
there's something deeper than that.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think that, first of all, historically women have always been objectified. So, and when we have these external messages, they trigger deeper insecurities that already exist.
Sure.
So, like, female empowerment is a relatively new concept. I mean, it hasn't been around that long. So the idea of us being able to be self-sufficient, own our
Right.
own lives,
Yeah.
be independent,
Yes.
that's pretty current. So we come from a long-standing history of powerlessness. So it's already so ingrained and coming generations down that it's already within us. So when media comes along and then adds to the problem by sending out these continual messages of perfection and women have now, I think there's an extra challenge of women. Not only are we taking care of the home, taking care of the family, we're also working. So less time to even take care of the self, and so it becomes those inadequacies and these messages of perfectionism that it seems to be more expected with all the roles we now have to play can really be hard on our ability to get past some of those unfortunate
Right.
messages.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of strength to overcome them if they've already been seeded in you.
So there are a lot of people who maybe haven't necessarily identified that they're in this space.
That's
of
correct.
This, you know, the boomerang
Right.
hasn't quite, or is coming back, keeps coming
Right,
back.
right. I mean, you know, creating change for yourself is, you do have to first own your life and take self-responsibility.
Yeah.
That can be really hard. And I mean,
Especially if you're a single mother.
oh yeah. I mean, the thing is that there's no right way or wrong way. It's really the outcome. So when you own your own life, in as much as it's challenging, because when you take self-responsibility, that means that your negative thoughts, you can't blame anyone for them anymore. When you're inadequate, you can't blame anyone for them anymore. You have to say, they're triggering me.
Yes.
And it can feel really hard, because like, wait a minute, I've always felt this way, or these messages are being sent to me by media and it's not my fault. But, you know, if you want to own your own life, the positive benefit outside of that challenge of how painful it can be to actually face yourself or take responsibility, it does allow you the opportunity to find your power, to find your strength. So that's the gift of it. But I don't underplay that it can be really hard. And if you have, back to the question that you asked, a really critical mind, or you blame yourself, you're not good enough, taking responsibility can be really hard, because you start blaming yourself for the problem. What I'm saying is not to blame yourself that you have the problem, to understand it came from, you're not to blame that you learned this because you receive these messages, but responsibility is not about blaming yourself, understanding kindly, with compassion, that you learned this from your environment, and so you come to believe this to be true, and now to challenge that and say, I can own my own way of thinking, and that's the difference.
Well, Nicola, thank you so much. Before we're almost out of time,
Right.
but do you have any tips that you'd like to offer in terms of what someone can do, the steps that they can take if they're feeling stuck?
Be kind to yourself. I can't stress that enough. Women are often so not kind. They take care of everybody else and forget themselves. And I will give the tip that I would say, just take 5 minutes. We always get caught in, I don't have the time, but even 5 minutes just to think about what's good in you, shift that thought processing, 5 minutes to just sit with yourself, to be quiet, whether you do it first thing in the morning, in the shower, cleaning your teeth, washing the dishes before you go to sleep. Just take some time to remember you and what's really good and positive in you, and celebrate that.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. Good luck with your book. And how can people get a copy?
It's online at Amazon and at Indigo.
At Indigo, okay. And for more information about you?
You can check out my website, www.drnicolabird.com.
Well, thanks again for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shannon. It was great being here. Thank you for having me.
For more information about upcoming shows or to contact me, visit the website at extraordinarywomentv.com. Well, if you are interested in transforming your life, I hope these stories have inspired you. You've been watching Extraordinary Women TV with Shannon Skinner. See you soon.